What's up, everybody? This is going to be another fun fitness realty training video. This one is all about the Utah real estate purchase contract. This is going to be a pretty quick down and dirty version of the real estate purchase contract. However, if you are in a local market that is outside of Utah, please get all of your state regulations and understand those as best you can. But there will be a lot of principles that are in this video that may apply to you. All right, without further ado, you can see on the screen we have Fred Flintstone, that's our buyer. So I already have a real estate purchase contract keyed up and ready to go. So we're going to open that real estate purchase contract. Most of this, I'm going to fly through the options that you can put into the real estate purchase contract. I probably won't type out very much. And the reason why I want you to get this quick version is because a purchase contract has a lot of nuances that are inside of it that you will need to understand, but those can be easily identified for each situation that you're looking for. I want to give you a general overview of how to use the purchase contract. So we've opened the purchase contract. We're going to do it on this date, so 20th of November, 2023. The offer reference date refers to the starting of the contract. So if you are offering on it today, that would be a great day to put. If you're going to offer on it tomorrow, you might want to put that date as well. So it just depends on what you're doing for your business. And then you're going to put your buyer's name here, all of your buyers. So if you have 3 parties purchasing the property, put those in here. And then they're going to offer to purchase from, this is where the seller's name goes. So if you know the seller's information, you can put that in here. Or for me, I like to use something called owner on record. I'm just going to type that out so that you can see it on screen. So I like to put owner on record. That just means every seller that could be on this property title, you're encompassing those. However, later on in this contract, you will have to use an addendum to specify who the sellers are. Then we're going to put down here for earnest money. We do have a training video all about earnest money, so I'm just going to put a generalized amount in here for $1,000. Then we're going to put in the form of check. If your client is going to use a cashier's check or personal check, both of those qualify. The main print that's in bold is making sure that you realize and your clients realize that this earnest money needs to be delivered to you, the agent, under 4 days, under 4 calendar days. So the way that works is once you get the offer accepted, let's say it's accepted today, that starts a clock for 4 days, 4 calendar days. So that you can count four calendar days after that. That's when the earnest money needs to be given to the agent. And then obviously it's got a little minor one in here, 4 calendar days for the earnest money to be deposited in the brokerage trust account. Let's see, me as a broker, I'm really focusing on those 4 calendar days to make sure that they get into the trust account. All right, now obviously you're going to put in the property address here. So let's say it's 123 Main Street, City of Salt Lake, County of Salt Lake County, State of Utah, zip code, maybe 84123, whatever it is. Then this is where you're going to put the tax ID number. We have a complete video all about the multiple listing service and how to find tax ID numbers. Put it in there. I highly recommend reading over this included items. In Utah real estate, we often write in other specific items that are actually in this paragraph. However, nobody really reads this paragraph, and so that's why things are written down twice. So I highly recommend reading this entire thing. One major topic that is in here is solar panels. If the home has solar panels, it generates a lot of other things, so you want to make sure that you really absolutely understand what it means to try to help somebody buy a house with solar panels. All right, if there's not any other items that are included in the sale, mark are not. If there are other included items, you would mark are included items. Most of the time in my contracts, there's nothing else that's going to be conveyed, so we mark are not. Now for excluded items, maybe the buyer or maybe the sellers have excluded the washer and dryer, so maybe type that in here. For me, if I don't have any excluded items, I'm going to put an NA or not applicable. And just put that in NA in there. The main reason why we cover up all the white space is so somebody couldn't come back in and write something else in there that we didn't want in the contract. Most of the time, I've never seen that happen on any of my contracts where somebody did something really shady. However, I have always had an NA in most of the boxes so that nothing could be put in. Now, water service, if it's just culinary water with the city, that's included, of course. If there are water shares, this water service says that all the water shares are going to be conveyed to the new buyer. If you wanted to exclude something, or maybe the sellers wanted to exclude their water rights, they would write in the exclusion here. I'd be very, very careful buying any property, though, that the water shares were excluded. Now, payment and purchase price, you're going to put your purchase price in here. Let's say it's $400,000. Then this line here, any amounts shown in section 2.1C and E may be adjusted as deemed necessary by the buyer and or the lender. That makes it so that you can change the new loan amount or the balance of purchase price in settlement at will. So if your buyer wants to change how much down payment money they're bringing, they can change that. The only thing you really want to be aware of is if you go too low on down payment money, that may trigger an FHA notification or a requirement to do a different addendum. And so you really want to focus on that. Make sure you understand what FHA loan requirements are, or VA loan requirements, or conventional, and make sure that you're not lying on this real estate purchase contract with saying your client's bringing too much money to the table or not enough. If you have more specific questions about what I just said about down payment money and too high or too low, text those to me and we can actually go over those. So in earnest money, we're going to put $1,000. Obviously, that's what our earnest money said. Additional earnest money, rarely have I ever used that, except for one time when my clients needed to get paid again, and so we waited 2 weeks and did some additional earnest money. Their new loan amount, this is where you're going to put the new loan amount. Maybe they're putting 25% down. Maybe they're doing 3.5% down. Talk to the lender and really understand what they're going to use for their new loan. Or if you have a general idea, this is why you can just generalize letter C and E, because those can be changed at will. Let's say our new loan is going to be $300,000 though. Let's say these guys are going to do 25% down or close to it. So they'd be $100,000 down. So new loan, I'd put $300,000. Seller financing is 0. Most of the time, if you're doing a seller financing deal, you understand those completely, and that's a whole nother ball game. But most of the time in residential real estate, it will be 0 in seller financing. Balance and purchase price, let's put $99,000. And so just so we have a screenshot of this, I'm going to put in the $1,000 for earnest money, $300,000 for new loan, and $400,000 for purchase price. Now you can see letters A through E add up to the purchase price, and you're stating the purchase price twice, once in the top and once in the bottom. If your buyer has a property that they have to sell to qualify for this property, then you need to mark is on this box, and it will generate the need for a subject to sell of buyer's property addendum to this contract. All it does is make sure that everybody's aware that this buyer does not qualify for this house unless they sell their other house. Now, if you have a first-time home buyer, though, most likely they're not going to have a property to sell. Of course, they're a first-time home buyer, so you mark is not. And then if you have a really overqualified buyer, it doesn't even matter. They can buy this next property with or without selling their other property. Then you'd also mark is not. Now, just a heads up, in the speed market where we were about 3 years ago and everything was just flying off the shelf, if you had a sale of a buyer's property addendum here, most likely that seller wouldn't accept that contract. And there were a lot of things happening to make sure that you didn't have to select this, even if they had a property to sell. But in today's market, it's a little slower. And so you really kind of can do both options if you had to. Sellers aren't necessarily just chucking down an offer or deleting an offer just because they have a subject to sell clause in there. All right, settlement happens when all of these things happen. So settlement can occur when all of these items are completed. There's lots of stuff with title. There's lots of stuff with their loan. I highly recommend reviewing that paragraph so that you understand what settlement actually means. Because we use settlement we use the word settlement and closing kind of interchangeably. And closing really is that the settlement is completed, all the signing, all the docs, all the money's transferred, and all the things like that. But closing is when settlement is done, proceeds of any new loan have been delivered, but to the closing office, the applicable closing docs have been recorded. So that's big. You know, property's not actually transferred until it's done and recorded at the county. And so sometimes we always say, hey, did you have a great closing? When really you might be saying, hey, did you finish your settlement? So I know that as real estate agents or people in real estate, we often use settlement and closing interchangeably, but it is better if you understand which one is which. Now, I won't lie. I often will ask my agents right now, did you guys have a good closing? So I'm just as guilty of using and interchanging those terms just as much as the next person. All right, when we get to possession on the multiple listing service, a lot of sellers will put what they need in time frame to move. So sometimes, let's say you're going to mark upon closing or upon recording, sorry. That just means that once it's recorded, they are transferring the ownership and giving you keys. Sometimes you might need 5 calendar days. So let's say you need 5 calendar days. We mark that in here. Sometimes the multiple listing service will say 72 hours. Whatever's in there, just make sure you really specify with your buyers and set expectations. Because there will always be an expectation that they're going to get the keys at the settlement table or when they go to sign, and that's just not the way it works. And so really set the expectations with your buyers. All right, now we're going to jump into prorations. So prorations just means there's things that could be on either side that need to get paid for. So there could be a special assessment. Maybe there's a new sewer line that was put in and that has a payment that needs to get handled. Most people are putting split equally between buyer and seller, but this is one of those avenues that you can actually negotiate. And maybe you right now in a seller's market, or sorry, in a buyer's market, you might be able to get the seller to pay for all these special assessments. They could also pay for the HOA or other entity fees. So this could be your HOA reinvestment fee. This could be all sorts of stuff. So right now, typically with every buyer, I start my contracts having the seller pay for those, and then we negotiate to either go split equally, or maybe we'll have the buyer pay the HOA reinvestment fee, and maybe we'll have the seller pay for the sewer line. There's lots of ways to kind of dice that up. The main focus there, though, is that everything is up for negotiation. So if you want to start hard and really protect your buyers, you guys can start with having the seller pay for those items. It's up to you. This confirmation of agency disclosure is very important to put all of the accurate information about who the seller's agent is, what their license number is, brokerage firm, brokerage license number, buyer's agent number, or name and their license number. This box really dictates who's in this transaction. So you really want to make sure that it is filled out properly. If you guys are practicing dual agency out there, this may be an option for you to select that you're representing both buyer and seller as a limited agent. So it's totally up to you guys. If you're representing both, make sure you're marking that. All right, title and title insurance. There is a title to the property. This information is all of the things that have to regard with title. I recommend reading through all of those very, very accurately and understanding each line item in there. Like I said, this video is going to be quick and about the things that you can put into the contract. Obviously, you're not going in here and changing any of the title language, so we're going to kind of breeze through that. There's more information about title insurance. There's more information about seller's disclosures. This is all of the information that a seller has to provide once you get under contract. It's tons of information. The only box that we're going to talk about, though, is the one that says other down here. Obviously, if it's blank space, make sure it's got an NA or not applicable. All right, buyer's due diligence. Typically in the state of Utah, we always want to have the buyer have some due diligence protection. So we're going to mark we're going to mark that this contract is conditioned upon due diligence. And due diligence gives the buyer the right to do all of these things. I want to make sure that I emphasize that you should read through what due diligence is and the protections that it affords your buyer. But the easy kind of quick way to say that what due diligence is, it is a golden bubble. Sorry, not a bobble. A golden bubble that really protects your client, that they could cancel the contract within this time frame for any reason or no reason at all. So the way I explain it to my buyers is, let's say we find out that there's a sex offender 3 doors down and that really freaks you out and you're like, I'm not buying this house. Well, then we cancel and we get our earnest money back. Or let's say the drive time to work, you find out that it really is sucky, then you don't want to buy the house, no problem. Or you just wake up in the middle of the night one night and you have an itch on your nose and you're like, this just isn't the house that we want to buy. Then you can cancel this contract for no other reason other than you don't want the house before this due diligence deadline, and you can get your earnest money back. So I love due diligence. I think that every contract should have due diligence in it. There are some realms for cash deals that you don't need due diligence, but I feel like every buyer should have the opportunity to have some due diligence time to really evaluate the property. All right, during the appraisal condition, if they are getting a loan, you will have an appraisal condition. That just makes sure that the bank is covered. So typically, let's say we're in a first-time homebuyer scenario and we're using an FHA loan product, then we would give our buyers the due diligence protection that they need, and we would get an appraisal condition in here so that if the appraisal comes back low, let's say in this instance, we're offering $400,000. Let's say we get it locked up and we go to get the appraisal and it comes back at $380,000. The appraisal condition says that before the appraisal deadline, we can cancel this contract for that low appraisal reason. However, what we train is that that's just a great time for you to start negotiating on the property. However, with the appraisal condition, you could cancel the contract on behalf of your buyers. Read through there what constitutes right to cancel and failure to cancel, because there's a lot of nuances with that. But we're going to move on to the financing condition. So if you're doing cash or somebody's doing seller financing or something weird, then you can do no financing required. Most of the time in like 99% of my offers for my clients, we've needed financing. So we would put financing required. This just tells everybody, hey, we've got to go get a loan, and there are loan requirements with this deal. And sometimes those loan requirements can't be satisfied by the buyer. And so that gives us an avenue to pull out of this contract if they can't get qualified to purchase the property. Or, you know, what sometimes happens is you start the contract and you get under contract, and halfway through it, your client loses their job. Well, this financing required protection that your client could have helps them kind of have protection against that, where if they lost their job, they could cancel this contract because they no longer qualify for that loan product anymore. So make sure you read through what it means for buyer right to cancel before the financing and appraisal deadline, or what happens afterwards. This box here where you can put something in, this just means if you canceled before the financing and appraisal deadline, but after the due diligence deadline, then this is how much money's on the table. Typically for every buyer, I start out with 0, so I want my buyer to be fully protected. However, a lot of agents will put a split cost in here. So let's say our earnest money is $1,000, we might put $500 in this box right here. All of that's negotiable though. So even if I sent this offer over to the other side and they said, well, we want $500 in this box, they can make an addendum or a counteroffer to that box. However, most of the time people kind of breeze through that. All right, this is the section for additional earnest money. Like I said, I've never needed to use this except for one time when my clients needed to get an extra paycheck for the earnest money. Otherwise, it's rarely used. I would be surprised if this was used even 1% of the time on any contract. So most of the time we mark will not, that there is not any additional money, and then we put in a 0 here, that the additional earnest money amount would be 0. That just means that we're not using it. Now here's the section for all of the addenda that you might use for any contract. Throughout this contract, it has kind of prepped us for a couple, right? We remember the subject to sell of buyer's property if we had to mark, if the buyer had a property to sell. If we're going to use an FHA addendum, this is a great place to put that. If we have an addendum that we already know that we're going to utilize, like we're related to the seller or related to the buyer, or you have closing costs that you want to ask for, this is a great place to specify how many addendums you're going to put on this contract. But let's just say this one's a fresh rep C, no addenda necessary. So we're going to mark are not. This part right here is where we would put the home warranty if we're going to ask for the sellers to pay for one. And so we could put will, marking that we want them to pay for a home warranty. And then this box marks who it's ordered by. So we would mark it ordered by the buyer and issued by the company selected by the buyer. And then the cost of the home warranty not to exceed, most of the time about $600 covers it, and shall be paid for at settlement by the seller. Now, this is a section that people love to kind of nickel and dime on. A lot of times, if I don't want any more little pieces trying to nickel and dime the sellers and I just want to get through it, I just will mark will not in this home warranty condition, and then I'll just delete all these other boxes and make sure those aren't covered. And the reason why I do that is because it just creates one more thing that people will look at. And so if I want them to only focus on the things that we have put into the contract, then I'll just mark will not. Now, oftentimes agents will buy a home warranty for their buyers. And so maybe they'll mark will not, and just means that nobody in this transaction is buying that home warranty for them. And then the agent can buy a home warranty later for their client. So that just, it depends on what incentives that agent is offering. For us, obviously, you guys know, for our agents, we are offering our buyers a 0.5% commission rebate if they buy a house with us and commit to doing something to make them the strongest version of themselves. So that's kind of the incentive program that we have. All right, condition of property is here. Condition of property the seller acknowledges is here. Read through those with a fine-tooth comb. Final pre-settlement walkthrough inspection. This qualifies your buyer to have an inspection, a final pre-inspection, up to 7 days before the closing, or before settlement, sorry. And so, see, obviously, we use settlement and closing kind of interchangeably. But anyway, this gives you the right, or gives your buyers the right to conduct that final pre-settlement walkthrough inspection. All right, changes during the transaction, they got to be in writing. They have to be all with the date of acceptance until the date of closing. And I'm going to read this line out loud to you. Seller agrees that except as provided in section 12.5 below, from the date of acceptance until the date of closing, the following additional items apply. This means they won't do any alterations unless they're going to be in writing. Financial encumbrances, you can't run out and put a new loan on that house. Property management agreements, you're stating that no changes to whatever's existing won't happen. Long-term lease, this is making sure everybody understands if there's already a lease in place, what happens with that. And then short-term rental bookings, also what happens with those. As Airbnb becomes more prevalent in our lives, short-term rental bookings, I think, will become more of a popular item. The authority of signers, this just makes sure everybody knows who has authority to sign this contract. The complete agreement or the complete contract is everything that's in this Rep C, plus addenda and other exhibits and anything else you attach to it. Mediation, there is a interesting disagreement or discussion that goes on with mediation and which one of these boxes is better. The way I'm teaching it currently is to mark may at the option of the parties. So if you mark shall, everybody has to go to mediation if there's a dispute. If you mark may at the option of the parties, it gives each party the option to say, we're skipping mediation and we're going straight to court. I feel like the may option is the one that just gives people a choice. And so choices are always good, and so I just feel like that's a better option. Obviously, mediation is going to be cheaper for everybody, so I used to mark shall, and now I mark may just because it gives people the right to choose what they want. All right, default. If buyer defaults, here's what happens. If the seller defaults, there's a whole nother class about default on the contract, so watch for that. Attorney's fees, this governs who gets their attorney's fees paid for and things like that. Notices, if you're going to do a notice, it needs to be in writing, signed by the buyer or seller giving notice, and received by the buyer or seller or their respective agent, or by the brokerage firm representing the buyer or seller no later than the applicable date referenced in the REPC. The huge key piece that this is not highlighted, but it needs to be, is that if another agent tells you and notifies you about something in writing, that is as good as telling your clients. So you need to be fast at telling your clients all the information that comes to you. All right, no assignment. This just talks about if somebody signs this contract and what happens if they wanted to transfer the authority of the signing or whatever like that. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so I've had this broken down to me from a legal point of view. And so most of the time, if it's your client that's a first-time home buyer, they're signing it for themselves and they're not assigning it to some corporation or anything. So most of the time, you won't need any of that. This is all about insurance and what happens with insurance and a risk of loss. This is all about the time is of the essence, which means unless otherwise specified in the contract, 5 p.m. Mountain Time is the deadline on a certain calendar day that we all use. So sometimes people will try to put 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever, but if it's not specified, then 5 is the deadline that we use on the purchase contract. This talks about electronic transmission and counterparts. As you guys know, our lives are so busy and so crazy. We're using e-signatures on lots of stuff, and that is still legal and binding. This just states that you guys are okay with that. You could set up something in a document that says you don't want e-signatures. I've never seen that happen. Obviously, we're using .loop, which is an e-signature platform anyways, and very good at what it does. So all this is saying is that it's good to use e-signatures and that people are okay with that. The thing that will come down to the very end that you still have to sign in a wet signature is when you go to settlement. And one day that might change, but right now you still sign in ink. All right, and then acceptance only occurs when all of the following have occurred. Seller or buyer has signed the offer or counteroffer where noted to indicate acceptance, obviously. And seller or buyer or their agent, once again, if your agent gets notified, that's as good as telling the client. And then these are the deadlines. We have a whole process for deadlines and how to go through those, but this is going to be the fast version of it. Typically, in a contract, you need about 1 week for seller's disclosure. So today's the 20th. I might put the 27th. And then due diligence is about 14 days, 10 to 14 days, maybe 10 business days, 14 calendar days. So on this one, we're going to go 14 calendar days from the date that we're writing this offer. Let's just call it the 5th, for instance. So that'd give us about 2 weeks and 1 day. Financing and appraisal is an additional week after that normally. So we're going to go 3 weeks out. Let's just put the 12th for all intents and purposes. And then settlement in a traditional contract takes about 30 to 45 days. Most lenders can do it much faster than that. And so I just put 30 days plus or minus a little bit. And so you have some leeway on that, some latitude that you could pull. And so let's just put December 20th. If I thought we needed an additional week to go and close, then maybe we'll do the 27th. So the thing that I try to point out, though, is that I love 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks as a general idea. So if you were to add this up, then we would just have a 4-week contract. Now that's the general idea. You can do plus or minus a bunch of those days. If you don't have due diligence, you might just completely scrap that. If you wanted a very long financing and appraisal deadline, you might need that. In a contract that we have currently in our brokerage firm, they have been under contract for 4 months. So they had a 4-month settlement deadline. That's way outside the norm, but anything is negotiable and it depends on everybody's scenario and situation. The other thing that I want to mention, though, on settlement deadline, closing on Wednesday is my favorite. Wednesday sets up so that it's in the middle of the week. And if you hiccup and something happens and you have to miss one day and you can sign after, then you still have Thursday to do that. If it's something catastrophic and you're like, whoa, we can't sign till Friday, then you're still okay to close and settle on a Friday. The thing that I hate to do is to set up closing on a Friday itself, because something always happens and then you wouldn't actually settle and record until the Monday following that. And sometimes then we have Monday holidays, which is pretty often. And so you can really screw up your contract by not putting the settlement deadline on a good day. Something to point out is you really want to look at a calendar and see observed holidays and see if those are landing on any of the deadlines that you're putting in here. Most likely, like this one right here, Wednesday the 27th of December would be great. A quick recap on the deadlines is, in seller's disclosure, we want about 1 week. Due diligence, we want about 2 weeks. Financing and appraisal, we want about 3 weeks. And settlement deadline, we want about 4 weeks or 30 days. All right, and lastly on this document, or we're getting down to the last, is the offer and time for acceptance. A lot of people feel that when they fill this block out, that they're putting some pressure on the other side to make a decision. It can do that sometimes, but not all the time. And so all I want you to recognize is that this is the offer and time for acceptance for this offer. What it really means is that you're giving this to the other side. Let's say we're going to give them until 9 p.m., right? So this would be explicitly changing that 5 p.m. time that we talked about. So let's say we're giving them 9 p.m. and I want to give them till Wednesday night. When I send this offer over, all this really does is say, hey, we would love an answer before this deadline. However, if we hit 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, this offer dies and we're going to walk away and do something else. So when we give it to the other side, the sellers really have 3 options, and all 3 options are down here. They could accept. So maybe they love this offer. It's exactly what they wanted. In my opinion, if you're a great agent, you've called the other side and really found out what that agent or what those clients are looking for, so that you can just match that if possible and make a really strong offer on the first foot that you put out there. So if we did a really good job, did our homework, and they love this offer, maybe they'll accept. They have to accept this offer if they want to make it legal prior to this 9 p.m. on Wednesday night. Now, if they want to counter, they can counter anytime. They could counter on Wednesday. They could counter on Tuesday. They could counter even on Thursday. So if this offer dies 9 o'clock on Wednesday and these people want to counter offer on Thursday, they can still do that, because it makes it almost a brand new offer coming to our side from that seller. And that's what counter offers do. All right, and then they could just flat out reject it. We've rejected hundreds of offers during the time that everything was bonkers, because people just wouldn't put a high enough purchase price. We have rejected several offers in the last recent little bit, just because the purchase price once again wasn't very high, or maybe the terms and deadlines just weren't that good. Rarely do we ever reject, though, just flat out, because most of the time we are better off to do a counter offer. But if your client feels like the offer really was distasteful, then they may just flat out reject it and not work with that person. So it's often one of those times, if your strategy is to really negotiate heavy on the price and you really undercut somebody, just realize they may get a bad taste in their mouth and just flat out reject and not want to work with you. So if you're looking for maybe a counter offer, you might have to take that into account. Okay, so that's the quick down and dirty all about the real estate purchase contract. I went over the boxes that we have control over, that we can put things into. We will make videos that are very specific about a lot of those nuanced items. However, I wanted you to have more access to this information at your fingertips and quicker, so that you can become more effective for your buyers. All right. Well, this has been another fun training video. Obviously, I'm TJ McClellan, broker of Fitness Realty. If you've made it this far and found value out of the real estate purchase contract information, will you do me a favor? Just like, share, and subscribe down below. That really helps our channel out. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.